All right, going to call the Finance Committee meeting to order. Present are council members Marmee, Cost, Bub, Blake, and sitting in for Frazier is Rath. First item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $175,000.
Yeah, this is for professional services for doing a study in the Cherry Valley Road area. You remember about a year ago we increased stormwater rates to do some work out in this area. And this is the initial master plan work that we're planning on doing here. We need to get started on that because we have a couple projects that are sitting there that we need to get moving on, and we need to get the planning done for it. So that's what this is for. So this will be out of stormwater funds. So.
Motion. Motion by Bub, second by Cost. Any questions or discussion on the $175,000 appropriation? Mr. Rath.
I was just wondering if you could more clearly define the Cherry Valley area.
This will be an area of Cherry Valley Road, kind of south over to, well, as Cherry Valley kind of cuts around over to 16 and then over as far as probably...
south to 16, you mean north to 16?
Or, north to 16, sorry. And then,
I have that problem.
yeah, and then over to, I think somewhere around 39th or 38th Street, somewhere in that, over towards the hospital. So,
okay, so Cherry Valley starting at West Main.
Yeah.
Going north.
Yeah.
And then as far over as 39.
Yeah.
So get rid of that dry well. It's awesome. Maybe.
We're going to try.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, the motion passes 5-0. The next one is for the $500,000 for the same thing.
Okay, this is for professional services again. This is for two projects that we're working on. We have scheduled for this year and next is some 0% interest money for some projects on our long-term control plan. And the first one is called our Cso Optimization Project, which is installing some siphons, which are pipes that go underneath the river, and a couple of little small interceptors to relieve some flow. To reduce the CSOs this is basically in the Iron Avenue, Raccoon Drive area, and at the confluence of the North and South Fork at CSO number 8 in those areas, and it also will include some services to clean some of the existing siphons. So that's one project. The second project is for the initial study for the 4th Street Interceptor, which is again a sewer separation project that is now scheduled to go from National Drive clear up to Church Street. And so this is the initial planning for this project, for that project.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Bub.
Second.
Second by Cost. Questions or discussion?
Mr. Chair, what's the timeline on that type of work, Roger?
Well, the timeline on the Cso Optimization Project, we have to have that out to bid by the end of this year to get the 0% money to do this work, which is what our goal is. And so it's about a 6-month design time. So if we get it going now, we'll have it designed and ready to bid by December of this year. The 4th Street project, we have that scheduled for a December 2019 loan award, which is $10 million at 0% interest. And so that's about a year's worth, a little more than a year's worth of design. So we've got to do some initial planning and then do the design. Start now, we'll be able to try and bid that sometime mid-19, probably get started then by the end of 19. So that's probably more like a 2020 project when construction would actually start. So.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
When you go through and do these lines, has there been discussions about what similar to like the downtown, what's 4th Street going to look like after it's all torn up and stuff, or is there discussions about what that's going to?
That's been a big discussion as to what that's going to look like and where those funds are going to come for any additional Streetscaping or beautification goes with that. Sidewalks, curbs. There's going to be curbs and gutters because it's a stormwater separation project. We know that for a fact. Probably going to be some replacement of water lines. We did a study about 7, 8 years ago, and we took a look at all the water lines in the city of Newark and the age of them, and we did what's called an integrated master plan. And we planned what lines need to be replaced as we go with other projects. And the water line runs down 4th Street was scheduled to be replaced anywhere between 2020 and 2024. So that's probably going to mean that we're going to need to do water lines for this as well. And so water lines, sewer lines, storm lines down through there. So again, it's going to be all due paving. That's why this section didn't get paved as part of the Route 13 paving project. They started both county lines. The only thing that didn't get paved was right in here because we're going to be doing this work. So yeah, there's been considerable discussion as to what that's going to look like, and some of that discussion is how that's going to be funded. We're going to have funding. So.
Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the motion passes 5-0.
You want to swatch up?
He left again.
Okay.
So, next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation. One's in the amount of $11,000, the other's in the amount of $5,000.
This is a payout for 2 officer resignations at the police department.
Motion.
Motion by Bub.
Second.
Second by Cost. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation amount of $2,000.
This is a donation, the $2,000 donation by Walmart to the fire department. They're looking to convert that money to smoke detectors, carbon dioxide detectors.
Second.
Motion by Cost, second by Bub. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Mr. Frazier, would you like to step in now? Or?
Yep.
Okay. Noted for the record, Mr. Frazier is here now, so he will step back in place of Mr. Rapp. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $150. Termination, it looks like for Jeff Motes.
This is just a payout for an employee that had been with us for a short period of time.
Motion.
Second. Motion by Bub, second by Frazier. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $16,183.20.
This was calculated by Lori Resta. This is for Lou Shoemaker, who is now an employee of the police department. I'm going to speculate, and it is speculation, that the budget was complete prior to that, all that legislation being final. So now they're going to have to go back. They're going back to provide funding for her health insurance as a city of, or a police employee as opposed to a AFSCME employee.
Okay.
Motion.
Or a street department, excuse me, street department employee.
Second.
Motion by Frazier, second by Bub. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
And the next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $1,050. Christina Barth.
This is in the, I'll speak to it. This is,
David?
yeah, all good.
Yeah. Christina changed over to a salaried employee, and as such, she can't get overtime or comp time or anything of that nature. This was what she had accumulated up until that point.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Bub, second by Frazier. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Next is an appropriation in the amount of $851,000.
Good evening. This comes not from the general fund, but the intergovernmental fund, and this is for the fourth quarter distribution of the taxes collected for the JED Z2.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Bub, second by Frazier. Questions or discussion?
I have one.
Yes.
Is this common, or is this the highest we've ever had it, or is, I mean...
The JED Z2 is a quarterly distribution, so I have to come and get the money after every
Yeah.
quarter to...
And last quarter
Give it up.
was on pace with this too, 851,000, and do we know what it was?
I don't remember
Is it
last
trending
quarter,
up
not
now?
off the
I
top
guess
of my
it was.
head.
Well, no, I'll deal with that.
Okay.
JED Z2 is primarily the Amazon fulfillment center,
Yeah.
and that just took off
Yeah.
near end of last year. So Mark, I doubt if we had anything anywhere near this
Yeah.
figure. I would expect that to probably sustain it, if not increase.
Yeah. I noticed a big increase year over year, so that's why I
Yeah.
figured that this was
Yeah.
the highest collection ever that we had for that Gen Z.
Yeah, if you just go back 2 years before the fulfillment center was completed, it was a fraction,
Yeah.
a mere fraction of this.
Yep.
Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation amount of $3,478.14.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an appropriation. We had an employee that was cleaning here in the city, took a job with the water department for a period of time. What we're appropriating and disappropriating here is dollars from her salary account that we're going to use to pay for professional cleaning services.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Bub, second by Frazier. Questions or discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes 5-0. Now I need a disappropriation in the amount of $3,478.14.
So
Second.
Motion by Bub, second by Cost. Questions or discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes 5-0. Okay. That is everything on the agenda. We do have a couple of items that are going to be discussed as far as late items. These cannot be voted upon, just discussed. There's a possibility that these items will be on at our next council meeting utilizing Rule 11. And the first item is a request for appropriations in the amount of, looks like $116,376.33.
Good evening. I apologize for the lateness of the item. I was ill last week, so I couldn't sign the document. So it looks like it went through the channels and it was submitted late. So this one is our probation improvement and incentive grant. This was not supposed to be for this calendar year. It was supposed to be replaced by the Justice Reinvestment and Incentive Grant, which it was, but the state told us about mid-December that we were going to have to prepare a budget for the probation improvement grant until all the money was exhausted. So we didn't have one prepared. We prepared one mid-December, late December. It didn't get in with the legislation that was approved, so we had to come today to explain this. So this is basically the line items for that particular grant to spend the rest of the money. There is a duplication, the 231, 232, 5318. It's listed twice, but with different amounts. The $7,133.25 was a return from Vance's Shooting Supply Company for tasers. They ended up sending the wrong one, so we had to return them and get the other one sent to us. So that's why there's a duplication there. But it's basically just our budget for the probation improvement grant.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there a timeline that you have to have this back to them by?
No. I mean, we're going to try to spend it as soon as we can, just so we can get rid of it, because we have 3 different grants now through the Department of Corrections, and it's complicated to manage all those budgets.
And so have you already submitted this plan to them, and we just need to appropriate the
Yeah, it's already been approved by them, and they've already, I mean, we already have all this money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this one? All right. The other one is for $75,718.
Yes, this is also a Department of Corrections grant. We already have this grant. It's our Intensive Supervision Probation grant. It's a 408 grant, but they put out where we could apply for an additional $75,000 and some change, so we applied for it and was granted that amount. So this is the budget for that particular amount of money. There is something on here, and I ought to say it about the one above as well, the other inter-government billings. ODRC, and I think they're one of the only departments within the state, sent us a letter requesting refunds that we received from the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. So this took some work from our auditor's office to figure out exactly what the amounts were, but once we figured those out, for the PIG grant it's $1513.08, and for the ISP grant it's $532. So we have to give that back to the state. So that's what the I wanted to explain that so you're aware of that. They actually are requesting that money back from us. But that's just the budget for the $75,000 and some change.
I have a question.
Sure, sir.
When you did your budget, was this planned for?
No, this is extra money.
Okay.
Yes.
Actually, I will say I did receive an email. This paperwork was prepared and submitted, and honest to goodness, don't know what happened to it. This one here was actually lost, but so they had to redo the paperwork. They didn't notice it until the agenda came out and realized, well, it's not on the agenda. Why is it not on the agenda? So there was an initial paperwork on this one, but don't know what happened to it.
Okay.
Any other questions? So Mr. Koss and I will determine whether or not we'll invoke Rule 11 next week at our full council meeting. But we wanted to make sure that we get this information out there, even though we can't, in accordance to our rules, vote upon it because it didn't meet the deadline of getting on the agenda. So if there's nothing further, this meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to call this meeting of the Safety Committee to order. Members Blake, Rath, myself, Fraser, and Fennell are in attendance. The first meeting on the agenda this evening is an ordinance for amending Chapter 454 and Chapter 407 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Newark, Ohio regarding the regulation of parking vehicles in the downtown area.
I'm here to answer whatever questions you have about the ordinance. This was a cooperative effort between Chief Connell, some of the downtown businesses, the Special Improvement District, I guess to put a name to it, who have concerns with some ongoing parking infractions. We needed to update our citation, which was out of date. We also would like to bring back some more active parking enforcement to satisfy a request from the law director's office for accountability. We're looking at buying out of capital improvement funds some parking measurement devices which actually track the GPS of a car. Then it has a timer. It also has internal software that will track the vehicle's location, the time. It'll store that. That makes everybody happy with as far as an electronic record of the violation that we can keep for a records retention factor.
Mr. Rath.
Could you, I don't know if you're aware, but I think we all received an email today about somebody questioning the time frame, the amount of time that somebody's allowed to park.
Okay.
The fact that it was 2 hours, the person that sent us the message felt that for somebody, especially somebody who might be elderly, who wants to come downtown and want to go out to eat and shop, that 2 hours was a very limited amount of time. I can definitely understand why we wouldn't do 4 hours. Her suggestion was 3, but that's one person. Can you give us some insight as to how you came to the conclusion of 2 hours? Is what happened with that discussion and how that came about?
I would say, well, go ahead.
Jeff, the time frame hours was done through a subcommittee of the Special Improvement District. The board met twice. The first time they met, a subcommittee was put together. The committee members that proposed this are business owners in the downtown area, and there was a healthy debate between 2 hours and 3 hours. So we'll see how this works. We'll see how it works. If people feel like they don't have enough time down there, what they're trying to do is just change patterns of employees and where they park.
Very well aware of that. That's why I
So,
know
but
that there would be a
to
forum.
get your question, where it came from was a subcommittee of the SID. It was a group of business owners that met together, and we all went over.
So that was simply that was the number they decided on.
Fair enough.
Can I entertain a motion?
Motion.
Second.
First by Rath, second by Fraser.
Motion from the audience.
Any questions from the audience or discussion? Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Director, if I got this right, the city's paying for a couple of the handheld devices to check the license plate at about $7,000 a piece, roughly.
Correct.
The fines then, will they go towards repaying for those devices, or who gets the fines? The downtown district, or we, or how?
The fines will be collected by the Licking County Municipal Court, as are all other fines. So
will those come back?
it will go back into the city.
Towards something?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So the handheld camera, it'll be specific to a parking spot, or is it for a downtown area? Like if somebody moves their vehicle to another spot, if it's the license plate, will it track that license plate as still being parked down there?
Parking from one street in a 2-hour zone to another street in a 2-hour zone won't save you, so to speak, from a citation. You could only go from a 2-hour zone to an 11-hour zone, or clear outside of that. If they would find you in an 11-hour zone, obviously you wouldn't get a citation. But moving from one side of the square to the other side of the square, or when I was a young city employee, a young police officer, 2 people running out of the courthouse and changing spots, that doesn't do it. The ordinance specifically addresses moving clear out of the 2-hour zones. So, and were city, county, and downtown business employees in mind for this enforcement? Yes, they were. I feel that is our greatest obstacle, is conditioning our employees, downtown employees, and county employees to park legally, and I feel there will be plenty of parking left for everybody else at that point.
Mr. Rath.
What are the hours of enforcement?
The hours of enforcement are, I believe, 7:30 to 5:30. However, what I'll say is an officer marking cars to come back and check in 2 hours after 3:30 is kind of fruitless, because at 5:30 when they would be in violation, that's open parking. So you could have enforcement anywhere from 7:30 to 5:30, I believe. It's in the ordinance.
7:30 to 5.
7:30 to 5. Thank you.
And is the downtown district funding the entire enforcement, or are we partially funding it?
Well, what I'll say is the SID will pay a special duty officer a special duty rate to enforce parking in the special improvement district. However, this equipment is not only available to the special improvement officers, but regular officers as well, to enforce parking around the city of Newark as a whole. The special improvement district will not be obviously required to pay for officers enforcing parking in other parts of the city.
And then the $7,000 for the handheld device, does that include software?
And that's a rough number,
okay.
And it would not include a yearly subscription, but I believe that's the initial payout for the devices themselves.
Okay. And then we'd have a reoccurring cost every year for upkeep and licensing.
Any other questions or discussions from the audience? Questions or discussions from the committee? All right, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
And that adjourns the Safety Committee meeting. Next is service.
All right, we'll call the Service Committee meeting to order. Those present are myself, Rath, Cost, Bub, Blake, and Lang. Up first, we'll consider resolution number 18-08. Authorizing participation and ratifying prior participation in the City of Newark, Licking County, Ohio with the Department of the Army Corps of Engineers for the Newark, Ohio Section 14 feasibility study, and authorizing the Director of Public Service of the City of Newark and other appropriate city officials to act for and on behalf of the City of Newark in executing accepting or otherwise approving all documents, agreements, instruments, or other necessary papers required by the Department of the Army to implement said participation in Newark, Ohio, Section 14 feasibility study. Mr. Loomis, please tell me what I just said.
That's the required language that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has said we had to put in a resolution. So that's why it's as long as it is. I'm not doing that just to make you look bad or anything. But
took a deep breath at the beginning, and I needed 2 more.
This is a project that we're working on. We've been working on in cooperation with ODOT and with the Army Corps of Engineers to redo a low-head dam that is on Raccoon Creek, basically almost at the exit ramp to Country Club Drive. That portion of Raccoon Creek was channelized during when 16 was installed. The Route 16 was built years ago, and that's part of our flood control project, which is why the Army Corps of Engineers is involved. They, as part of this Section 14 study, will do the design work on this up to $100,000, and we had original agreement to go ahead and do that because it was no cost to us. We've gone over the $100,000, and so now we have to have an agreement that says we're going to be willing to pay the money above and beyond that. They're estimating that right now to be $120,000 total, so an extra $20,000 that will be split between us and ODOT to pay. So we're probably going to be around the $10,000 mark. Now that money would come out of stormwater money. This is a flood control project. But we have to have this, we've got to sign a whole bunch of agreements with them, and that's what this is all about, is signing agreements, and then we'll come back appropriating money and all that kind of stuff. So after ODOT does their thing as well. So
I'll offer a motion.
Motion by Bub.
Second.
Seconded by Lang. Any questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor of sending this on to full council signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. That'll move on to full council with a vote of 5-0. Thank you, sir. Up next will be resolution number 18-09, authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service for the City of Newark, Ohio, to enter into a purchase agreement with Park National Bank for the lease purchase of 6 cruisers for the Division of Police. Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. After Director Bob and I reviewed the status of our police vehicles, even though we brought 4 in last year, it was determined that we should bring 6 in this year. We're putting them on a 4-year lease purchase. At the end of the term, those vehicles will be ours. The first 4 we did on a 3-year term, so we'll be back at the end of next year to get a few more vehicles in.
Love to hear a plan. Any question from the committee?
Motion.
Motion by Bub, seconded by Cost. Any questions from the audience? Mr. Frazier?
Are we planning to decommission vehicles as these new ones comes in, or are we just?
We do, and we use the parts where we can, and then at the end of that, we sell them at the city auction. So yes.
Mr. Ellington?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know it's been part of your plan, Dave, to start or to continue figuring out how we're going to rotate these vehicles on a yearly basis, so
Yep.
we have some kind of a 5 or 8 or 10-year plan.
Yep.
How are you doing on that?
Well, this is the second step in that plan, and this will give us 10 vehicles that are in pretty darn good shape. You know, the way we view it is these vehicles are the officer's office, and they need to be in good condition. You know, they have to have the ability to speed up and stop very quickly. They have to have the ability to haul people properly, and our police vehicles were never really in any type of cycle. If you remember back when we started on EMS squads and the EMS legislation was changed to get them into a cycle, if you talk to the firefighter paramedics now, they'll say that our squads are in some of the best shape that they've been in, if not in a long time, if ever. So we're hoping to put our police cruisers in that same type of rotation.
And I know a lot of those probably run 24 hours a day.
Oh, they do. They do. Yep.
Mr. Rhodes, just curious, recalling a previous conversation from our previous police chief, what do you know what type of vehicles we're buying? What's the make and model?
We're buying the same things we bought prior. They are, I'm going to blank here real quick.
SUVs.
SUVs. They're not the Tauruses that they used to get. It is for people to be able to get in and out of easier, and it's better for the officers.
Better for the officers is all I care about. Not real concerned about how comfortable our prisoners are.
I kind of agree with you there.
Like I said in that meeting several years ago, strap them to the hood for all I care.
Yeah.
Mr. Marvin.
So what's our fleet need and total fleet need, and what is the estimated lifespan of these new SUVs compared to the other vehicles?
You know, Doug, that's a fair question, because a lot of the vehicles that we have here are vehicles that have been kept around to use for parts in the future. So we'll be analyzing to get a firm number. I don't know if that number is going to be 16 or 17, but those are things we're still drilling down on.
Okay. Because if we're switching the types of vehicles, the parts are really...
They're irrelevant. Yeah. A few items can be used, but the majority of them cannot.
If I recall, the reason we were switching the types of vehicles is because the Crown Vics were no longer made. Is that accurate?
I'm not sure if they're no longer made.
Safety director is nodding his head.
Okay.
And at the time we were talking about whether we were going with
that's why we work
Crown
on these
Vics
things
immediately,
together.
because the last ones are coming off the line.
Yeah.
Or if we were going to go with the Dodges, that's where the comfort joke came from.
There's a lot more room in the SUVs for a minor increase in price. I want to say it's $1,500 over the sedan. The lifespan now, not counting a vehicle getting into an accident or something like that, you should be able to get at least 6 years out of a car. They're driven probably 16 hours a day. They really try not to drive them 24. And as far as the old Crown Vic, no, it's not being made anymore. They are making a sedan type of interceptor, but most departments are going to the SUV simply because there's a lot more room and you sort of sit up into it as opposed to getting down into the side into it. And it's really, we think that it's going to cut down on sore backs and wrenching or and just simply speed of being able to exit a vehicle when you need to get out of it quickly.
Just curious, while you're talking about more room, are we, I think I know the answer to this question, but are we carrying more gear today than perhaps we were
Always.
10 years ago?
Always. Police and fire are carrying more equipment now than they ever have. So the technology's better and it's more available, so but frankly, that cuts both ways. You won't see an officer typically carrying a gear bag anymore, but all the books that I used to carry, they now carry on their smartphones. So, but still, there's a stand. They're taking reports in their cars from their MDTs. Firemen are all carrying laptops that they're doing their paperwork on. We're in a digital age.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Fraser. Thank you.
From an unmarked vehicle perspective, do we have to start purchasing some unmarked vehicles? Is that next in line, or is the demand really on patrol cars to get those in line, and then we're going to focus on the unmarked vehicles?
There's demand on all of our vehicles, Mark, but we focus currently on them.
Yeah. So that might be for next year's discussion.
Could be. We struggled to get these cars into a rotation. I've shared with Doug many times the spreadsheet on capital improvements and what we've had to pay off since we've come in order to get ourselves in a position to put these police vehicles in a rotation. And we're now just getting to that. We're kind of crawling. I wouldn't even say we're walking yet, but those are all on our mind. Some of the staff vehicles for the fire department, if you remember a couple years back, we bought those secondhand and used and had them restriped. I don't know if something like that is an option. But the nice thing is we get into these discussions, we meet with the safety director, we meet with the chief, we talk about what the needs are and the priorities.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That will move on to full council with a count of vote of 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we'll have resolution number 18-11, authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service to advertise for bids and enter into contracts subject to the appropriation of funds for various construction projects. Mr. Moorhead, how are you, sir?
Thank you. So I sent you that list of projects there. The first one is at Cedar Hill Cemetery. It's to do roadway repairs and resurfacing. You want me to go down through these one by one, or you want an explanation, or?
If you can keep the explanation brief, then.
Okay, all right.
And then expand on questions.
All right.
If necessary.
All right, so item B is the 2018 street maintenance project. That'll be our annual resurfacing project. Item C is the Isabel Road rehabilitation project. We've got some leftover 2017 state capital improvement grant funds that we intend on putting towards that project. Item D is our 2018 Collector Street resurfacing. That has 2018 state capital improvement funds to it. And item E is 2018 concrete maintenance. Still undetermined if that project's going to move forward or not. We're going to see how the funding goes, but we've got something kind of sketched up. We'd like to put it out to bid if all goes well. And then item F is a siphon cleaning project with the wastewater department. We've got several siphons that cross underneath the rivers, and those need to be cleaned on a periodic basis, and so that's something the wastewater department would be doing.
Okay.
Any questions? I'll try to answer them.
Any questions from the committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bub?
I just wanted to say it's a good list, Brian. Growing up on Isabel Road, I know that it's a good idea to re-slope that. It's been a challenge for years. So With that, I'll offer a motion.
Second.
Motion by Bub, seconded by Lang. Mr. Blake?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Moran, what streets are you targeting for this year? I mean, do you ever have a list of where we're going to be surfacing in 19?
I've got the item D list is already made out. It's up in my office. I can email that to you. The item B list is not complete yet. I still have to trim that down to fit within the budget numbers, but probably have that within the next month or so here.
How do you go about determining what gets on your list?
Look at the condition of the streets. Carry over the streets that didn't get paved last year. We put them, take another look at those, and then any of the new requests that we've had come in, and then any streets that we know that have issues and so forth. Usually we like to try to wait till the end of the winter to see how things deteriorate, and with our kind of roller coaster, warm temperatures, cold temperatures, that really breaks them up. So there could be streets out there that didn't make the list last year that are really needing it this year. So we have to, it's a comprehensive review every year.
Any other questions for the committee? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Collins, you're here.
I would agree that that's an impressive list, and I did want to say that the wall and the fence on Cedar Hill Cemetery, I want to commend you and Director Rhodes both for that just looks phenomenal. That's such a huge improvement.
Thanks. I think it'll help with their maintenance and the issues that they had trying to mow that, keep that mowed down.
Mr. Frazier?
When it comes to E, is there specific areas that's targeted for that concrete?
Actually, it goes along with item B, more or less. So basically the streets that we pave that have curb ramps or have sidewalks with inadequate curb ramps, that's the ones we target.
I see another question from the audience. I saw no hand. All right, see no other questions. All those in favor of passing this on to full council signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Yeah, we'll move on to council with a vote of 5-0. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
And that concludes the service committee. That will stand adjourned. Following next will be the rules committee.
We'll call the Rules Committee to order. Members present are Marmee, Frazier, and Blake. We do have a few items on our agenda this evening. Our first item of business is to discuss amending council rules by adding Rule 4A regarding the selection of party leadership. You've received this, so I'm not going to read all that. But are there any questions or concerns from the committee or from the audience?
So, if I may.
Yeah.
So just looking through this, basically, the political party has the first say up until the organizational meeting. Once the organizational meeting happens, if there's no determination, the request is who's interested. If there's nobody interested, then it goes through council. If people are interested, they are identified, and then council votes on them. Is that how? Pretty accurate summary?
Any other questions or comments?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Marmee.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. Last chance. Any other questions? Mr. Lane.
Yeah, so we're specifying that each political party identifies, how is that being determined? So let's say there's 2 or 3 or 4 people that all want to be leader. They just come forward and say, I don't agree with this choice. Can any one person from a party determine that the leader has not been chosen? We're not designating, there's no designation of who actually says, okay, yeah, there's a leader that's been chosen. How does that mechanism work?
My thought is, in the organizational meeting, if nobody says, it would be a consensus basis, where is there a consensus, and if there's not, then it goes to a vote.
I think at a certain point you could get to the what ifs, this, that, and I.
No, I understand. I think I'm thinking of a scenario where there's 5 members of a party and one of them doesn't like what the other 4 are deciding. Can that one person invoke this essentially and put it to a full council?
I would think not, but that's me.
I mean, I think it is determined by your caucus.
Yeah.
Is how this reads. And so
with those 4 members, Mr. Law Director?
The way I interpret the rule is that the party caucus will meet. Take Mr. Lang's example, there's 5 members. Let's say they vote 4-1, okay? At the organizational meeting, the president will ask that caucus, have you identified a leader? At which point in time they will say, we voted 4-1 in favor of this person. The person who got the 1 vote could pipe up and say, I don't agree, at which point it would be the president's responsibility to gavel that person into silence because the caucus is speaking 4-1. If they're not able to come up with a name because they voted 2-2 or they just couldn't come up with a name, that's when the council voting procedure would kick in. But I think under the president's authority to maintain decorum, if the caucus says we voted 4-1 in favor of this person, and the one who wants to speak up, that's the president's responsibility to quieten that person.
Any other questions or comments? Well, Mr. Cross.
I guess at one point there was a discussion too if seniority would be a consideration. And I don't see that stated on there in any sense. And I just wonder if that would be considered a factor as well.
Mr. Walter?
Based on the committee comments and based upon how, just kind of a historical precedent for this kind of thing, how a party caucus selects its leader is completely and totally up to that party caucus's internal rules. And if they want to consider seniority or not, that is up to them. If the vote comes to council at that point, because they were unable to agree on one name, then each member of council can vote as they deem most appropriate. Now, I didn't hear, I watched the video of the Rules Committee. The consensus that I heard did not mention that if there wasn't a consensus if there wasn't a selection from the caucus, that the person with the highest seniority from that caucus would be appointed. Because I don't like what ifs either, but a very obvious what if would be, what if the 2 most senior members of that party caucus were sworn in on exactly the same day? Which one's senior? So I avoided that whole thing simply by saying the members of council are going to vote, and you can base your vote on whatever factor you want to base your vote on.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? We have a motion and a second. All in favor of moving this on to full council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. Next rule up is to discuss amending council rules by adding Rule 2A regarding when committee meetings shall occur.
I have.
Mr. Frazier.
So my concern with this one is I don't think that holidays are encompassed in this rule as is. We have the 1st and 3rd for the committee times, but we don't have the portion of if there's a holiday, we go to the next Monday or we go to the Tuesday. Does that need to be in here for?
There's an argument that can be made that this rule is not necessary at all, because quite frankly, the way our current rules read, committee chair can call the meeting of that committee at any time deemed most appropriate given 24 hours notice to the necessary parties. So you can make the argument that this rule isn't even necessary. If you want to nail this down so that we're limited to 1st and 3rd Mondays at 5:45, then I would agree with you that we probably should add in there but for the Monday holidays, which is easy enough to do between now and next Monday.
And our current rule is the Tuesday. Is that written in, or is that just kind of what we've gone by previously?
First business day following the Monday holiday, which usually is Tuesday.
Should we Should we amend this here, Doug, or what do you think?
Rule 1 says that when a regular meeting falls on a legal holiday, the meeting will be held the following Tuesday at 7 p.m.
Problem with that came up this year.
Right.
Because Tuesday following the Monday holiday was a holiday too. Monday holiday was December 25th. Tuesday was a government holiday too. So we ended up having a meeting on Wednesday simply because it makes sense and it's logical, but it doesn't fit specifically with the rule. Because
so if we were to amend, you would have to amend Rule 1A, not necessarily this rule.
I think we're really overthinking it.
Yeah, years ago, they had committees on 3 nights a week. They just, whenever the committee chairman called, some on Monday, some on Tuesday, some on Wednesday. I'm not advocating for that, but I'm saying it was very open at the time. They obviously wanted it that way, I guess. So you always need to consider the other side of what restrictions can do. Sometimes, ooh, I wish we didn't have this rule. And if it's in the power of the committee chairs and they tend to agree to have them prior to council, then maybe it doesn't need a rule. But that's entirely for you guys to discuss and think.
Well, there's also the president of the council can call a special meeting at any time, and that can be done also. And so we do have we've had meetings on Thursday night because we had to vote on a budget before the end of the year. I remember those. So special meetings can also be called.
Mr. Ryan. I agree special meetings can be called and committee members or committee chairs can call a meeting whenever we want, but I think the idea or the spirit behind this, whether we want to make it a rule or not, the spirit behind this was to have something predictable so as to encourage and not confuse public participation. So having meetings on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday obviously would confuse public participation. It would confuse me. So, I mean, with that said, I don't know that we need to have a rule, but I think we need to have, at minimum, an agreement of consistency to allow for predictability, to encourage public participation.
My thought is to work with the law director, pass this, and see if it's necessary to add the next business day clause in there in case of a holiday. If it's not, we can talk about it at full council, get everybody on the same page, and pass this as is, present it to council to see what they think, and if we need to amend it to specify those conditions, we can. If we need to amend it to certain specifications, we can, and we'll pass this on to full council for the time being in order to make sure that everybody gets a voice on the council.
Mr. Lamb.
I guess I have one other question for the law director on this. Do we also need to clarify when legislation comes out in committee, which council meeting it would go to? I mean, we've discussed obviously that if we met tonight, in the meetings tonight, it wouldn't go to full council for 2 weeks. I don't want there to be any confusion in this rule that something that we passed that night through the regular course would go on to council that same night. The intent is always that it would go to council at the subsequent following full council meeting.
I'd have to look at that in terms of the other rules that are present with regard to the timing of legislation. Because I think that might cover it, but I'm not certain. But I can look at that before next month.
I can answer that. I can answer that. There's a rule that says that legislation has to be presented in order to get to a committee meeting by Thursday at a certain time, and in order to make an agenda, it has to have been heard by a committee. So there's no way to make an agenda if it hasn't been heard by a committee. Those rules are already in place.
The agenda's already set. So
correct.
You had, Doug, did you want to say something else before Jonathan spoke?
I was simply going to say that this is not a typical legislative process to amend the rules. So if this particular proposal passes out of committee tonight, before Monday, I will add the reference to Monday holidays to correct that issue.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Frazier, second by Mr. Marmee. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, opinions? All those in favor of moving this on full council signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 3-0. I wanted to add an item since we're discussing all these different rules and things. The third item on our agenda is discuss the city appointment process. I guess I've had discussions with Don and several other people before, and even with Doug Sasson. It just sort of, it seems odd to me that and this isn't against any one individual or anything, it's just purely process, about when we receive our agenda for full council, there's someone's name that gets appointed to some board. There's not even a motion or a second, but we just do a voice vote on that person. And I guess I just wanted to get people's thoughts about that process itself. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there, I would favor more of a resolution and go through the normal legislative process, but since we're not discussing rules, I wanted to get people's thoughts on what they've experienced with that. And Doug, you're the longest serving member,
Yeah.
so.
I guess I can just share, first of all, it's not a piece of legislation, it's an appointment to get a vote approval. I will also state that any member of council can ask the chair for a vote by name or you can ask for it with anything like that at the beginning, whenever we do a voice vote. Any member of council, and that should probably be brought up in caucus, that on this item I would like to have a voice vote. Anybody can request that of the chair. A roll call vote, yeah.
But that would make it, I guess that's not answering my question to the process though. I mean, we receive those agendas and then there's a few days. I mean, typically we know who these people are, most of us are, but there are times when, like, who is this person getting on this board or that board? And so it would be nice to have some lead time to go into that. I mean, to have I hear what you're saying is you can request a vote or a recorded vote, right. But it's just like that's the.
Okay, you're saying that you want more advanced notification.
That's what I would think, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, typically Don would say the name and the mayor would say a few words about the person, but really we don't know who this person is, and I just feel like there should be some more legitimate process as to going through with appointments, so I wanted to bring it up here.
I guess I'd be open to understand. I mean, so the appointment process is primarily on the executive side. So they vet the candidates. They are the ones that ultimately get to make the appointment, and then it's our duty to object if we feel like there's issues. And so I don't know how much more time it would take in order to be able to fully vet. I mean, are we talking about like an FBI background check? Or the question is then it becomes a time game where is 1 week enough? Is 2 weeks enough? Is a month
Well,
enough?
that's why I just say the normal legislative process. I mean, someone comes in, you want to put them on a board, whatever that board, if it's the Parks Board or the JEDZ Board or whatever else, put their name in a resolution and go through the regular process. That's what I would suggest. Mr. Rath.
If I could just ask for a point of clarification. If the mayor appoints somebody to a board, is that a legislative process? Is that an executive process? Or is that an administrative process?
And I'll let Doug Sasson jump in here, but my understanding is that when it's a city of Newark appointment, it's generally referred to as wanting a council action. Because the mayor makes appointments to other boards that we don't see on those agendas. But I'll let Doug refer to answer that.
It's really based upon the founding documents of the organization to which the appointment is being made. And they generally tend to fall into three categories. The appointment is made by the city, which has been interpreted as the mayor making a recommendation to a council and council making the appointment. There are a few rare instances when the appointment is made by council, at which point in time the mayor has really no say in it other than to perhaps make a suggestion and council moves forward. I'm not sure there's any of those left anymore. And then the last is an appointment that's made by the mayor. And then when that shows up on your agenda, it's for informational purposes only. council doesn't really have an opportunity to object. It's the mayor saying, I appointed this person. So it goes back to the founding documents of the organization in which the appointment's being made. So it's all three of the above, depending on what those documents say.
Good.
Ms. Wright.
So it wouldn't be all three of the above if it required a vote from us. Either
No.
thumbs up or thumbs down. That's a council action.
Correct. If it's, for example,
But if mayor is making an appointment and he's telling us for informational purposes, that's clearly an administrative or an executive decision.
correct.
But if we are asked to voice our vote on that, then that is clearly a council action.
Correct.
Is that, just confuses things in my mind more.
Sorry.
Not about the process, but about my opinion of this conversation.
So, my takeaway is I would like to see whatever you're thinking and we can assess it. I personally don't have a problem with the appointment process. I think being notified and allowing the executive to do their due diligence and present to council their case, I don't necessarily have a problem as it currently is. That's probably where I'll leave it.
All right. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
This is one probably for Don to follow up with Autumn more, but when we pass ordinances and resolutions, we're required to publish those, and that costs money.
Yes.
So if we do this by voice vote, then that's essentially a motion to adopt, a motion to approve. It finds its way into the minutes. If you do a resolution or an ordinance appointing so-and-so to such and such a committee, that's got to be published in the paper, and that costs money. I have no idea how much that is. A lot of them could tell us that, but there is a cost associated with doing this.
Mr. Rack.
If we really wanted to, we could say that any appointments that we need to vote on need to be presented at the council meeting prior. And then we've got 2 weeks, actually 2 weeks and a few days, to do whatever vetting we want. 2 weeks and a few days because that's going to be on the agenda. The only problem with that is if you get to a point where you have to appoint somebody quickly, then you're going to tie the hands and slow the process down. But it would satisfy.
Well, we've accommodated that. I mean, a big example is Steve Lehman. I mean, he wasn't even on the agenda, and we voted to appoint him that same night. So he wasn't even appear on any written material. So I mean, it just my concern has always been just the process, always just being clunky. So to me, Mr. Lehman.
So is the concern that we're not carefully considering the appointments that are being brought forward and we're approving them too quickly? I guess I'm concerned with adding additional processes and slowing things down. If somebody's presented to any of us and we don't feel that they're appropriate for the appointment, it's easy enough in the roll call vote to oppose, as you've done it on a few. And if there's others that oppose it, they could oppose it as well. So I guess we're putting it to a vote, so everybody has their chance to. And if it comes up and there's not an opportunity to vet somebody, then I would think we would all sit up there and vote against the appointment. So we already have our chance. I guess I'm not sure I understand the need for additional time.
Also, if there's the opportunity, like in Steve Lehman's case, for example, that came up that night, we voted on it that night. If you're not comfortable with that, there's an opportunity to make a request to table until the next meeting.
All right.
And I would feel comfortable with that. Is that a possibility? Anybody? We're going to vote on an appointment. Can somebody stand up and say, I'm not comfortable with voting on this person because I don't know who the heck they are. Can we please table this for 2 weeks? Is that possible in parliamentary procedure?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Any other, Mrs. Marmy?
No, not on that subject.
Oh, go ahead.
Done.
Go ahead. Yeah. Oh, any other comments or questions? Okay.
I just wanted to note that since Mr. Lang and I went to the laptop versus printing, 68 pages of paper were saved this evening. So, just from committing paperwork.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Okay, seeing no other business of the Rules Committee, we will adjourn, and up next is capital improvements.
All right, I'm going to call this meeting of the Capital Improvements Committee meeting to order. Those present are Hall, Rath, Labutus, myself, Lang, and Fennel. First up, we're going to consider appropriation in the amount of $36,746 for machinery and equipment. Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's just what it is. It's mowers and equipment for the parks and cemetery in the city. We're going to have two particular growth areas in the parks this year, one being at Everett and the other one being at Flory, as well as we're redoing Wells Park in the spring with grant dollars that we've got, and with the better equipment we should be able to maintain the parks in better conditions.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Hall, second by Rath. Is there any discussion from anyone on the committee? Mr. Rath?
You said the word, I got to ask you the question.
Go ahead.
What's the progress at the dog park at Flory?
Two dog parks, one small, one large, and there's also dog parks being considered for Everett Park.
And the two dog parks at Flory are up?
No.
Okay.
No,
so
spring. It'll be spring.
Spring, okay.
Any other discussion from anyone? Mr. Frazier?
When we bought mowers and weed whackers last year, right?
Mhm.
We keep an inventory of that.
We do.
Everything's carried over from last
Yep.
year, and these are just net new needs.
Yep. The weed whackers, in all fairness, get about a year. These things are run. There's 30,000+ headstones we have to trim around. So weed whackers are an every year expense.
Why are they capital improvement?
Just always have been. It's a fair question.
Any other discussion from the committee?
It's a really good question, Doug.
Anyone else in the audience? Mr. Costa?
I would encourage this, just absolutely encourage this. I'm amazed at the improvement we've made in our parks, and I want to thank Director Rhodes for that work, the people that have been making such huge strides.
Well,
our parks are really coming around.
Bill, thank you, and I appreciate that, but it doesn't come without the support of council, the support of Director Motter and his department, and all working together.
Jeff Hodgkins.
Well, Jeff Hodgkins, he's the team man.
Any additional discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of sending this on to full council signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes 5-0. Next on the agenda, we've got appropriation in the amount of $4,339.34 for buildings for the Parks and Recreation.
Mm-hmm. We're going to be adding an additional storage building down at Don Edwards Field. Store brick dust, bases, additional equipment.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion.
Second. Motion by Rath. Second by Labutus. Any discussion from the committee? Anyone in the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor of sending this on to full council signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Passes 5-0. And last on the agenda, we've got an appropriation in the amount of $10,000 for tree trimming. Mr. Rhodes?
Through the year, we analyze different trees on different city properties, and we make decisions whether to take them down or not. And this sets money aside to do that. If we don't take any trees down, these dollars roll back to the general fund.
Thank you. That'll entertain a motion.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Fennell. Second. Saul? All right. Any discussion? Mr. Rapp?
Are we taking trees down ourselves, or are we subcontracting this out?
Both. We bought a bigger chainsaw, if you remember last year. So on some of the ones that we weren't able to get in the past, we're taking down ourselves. But there are some trees with long branches and overhangs that we don't feel comfortable in taking down. So then we hire that out. We just dropped 2 trees earlier this week, earlier last week, that we took down ourselves, one of which we wouldn't have been able to do without the chainsaw we bought last year. So we're trying to do as much as we can ourselves, but this sets money aside just in case.
Just
each
you know, I
tree's
trust you. You know, I have total faith in you. And I hate to question you, but I'm really wondering why this is coming out of capital improvements, though.
No, it always has. We can make it a line item next year, as I'm probably going to make the weed whackers a line item next year, and I'm okay with doing that.
Does that question sound reasonable? I mean, a capital improvement is a capital improvement. Cutting down trees, I don't know that it's a capital improvement.
Well,
of course, maybe I'm wrong too.
No, you could argue it either way.
Question.
This is just a past practice. Is it a good past practice? I don't know. It's pretty easy to put a line item in the budget and put it in for tree trimming and repair. You could do it either way, and I'm not opposed to that.
If there's money.
If there's money, yeah.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Questions or comments from the audience? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of sending this on to full council signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Passes 5-0, and the Capital Improvements Committee stands adjourned.